on the mule's feet, Still had told the truth, and the shoe marks are his witnesses. A few months after the mule and footlog adventure, I was called to visit a sick lady named Jones about 10 miles from my home, and in order to make the trip to and from short as possible, I took near cuts, some of which led through the woods. On this particular occasion, by going through a thick body of timber, I could save about 2 miles. Entering the timber, I followed a path at full gallop, and all at once my mule began to slack up and threw her ears forward. I walked carefully and very reluctantly, by which I knew that men were close. Knowing that the blood of the opposition was up to a fever heat, I brought my revolvers front in my belt, unslung my sharpshooter, and prepared for any emergency. Not knowing the exact position or the number of the enemy, I concluded the best plan to be safe was to prepare to be dangerous. In about a minute's time, I was in an open space of about 1 acre in the timber, in presence of a company of 50 or more pro-slavery men. My deadly enemies in politics, who had assembled in this secluded and secret place to drill for the purpose of flighting anti-slavery men within a very few days. I cannot say that my hair stood on end. Under the circumstance, I didn't consider there was any time to fool with hair, and knowing that the bulge counts much in all engagement, I spoke with a loud, firm, and commanding voice. "What in the are you fellas up to?" I answered by the captain in command. "Where in the are you going?" I saw in a moment that my firmness had produced good effect, and there was no further danger. I rode up and stopped in front of the company, shook hands with the captain, told him to give the command to me and I would drill his men, and show him how Jim Lane and John Brown did it, concluding with, "If you don't have your men better trained, and Jim Lane ever meets you, he will shake you up." The captain turned his men over to me, and I drew them up in line and put them through all the cavalry movements, tangled them up, straightening them all out, and told the captain he must drill better, so they could get out of tight places when they met us. Then I turned the company over to the original Captain Owens, who said, "Attention, company, this is Dr. Still, the damnedest abolitionist out of hell, who is not afraid of hell or high water. When you are sick, go for him. He saved my wife's life in cholera, and I know him to be successful in any place. You are a mind to put him. In politics he is our enemy, in sickness he has proven to be our friend." And closed by saying, "Doc, go home to dinner with me, and I will go with you to see Mrs. Jones." I went with the captain to dinner, and he made his word good by going with me. From that time until the close of the pro-slavery question in 1857, I met, passed, and repassed his men without fear or molestation. I was chosen by the people to represent Douglas County, Kansas, in the legislature. Among my colleagues were such men as John Spear, George Ditzler, and Hiram Appleman, all ardent Free State men who loved to hate slavery in all its forms, believing it to be opposed to all progress of men and nations. I was chafed to know that my old state, Missouri, my home for 20 years, had 15,000 acres of school lands, of which not a dollar was applied to school purposes. When I wanted schooling in my young days, this money, over $1 million, was being used to buy mules and niggers, and I, cheated of my rights, paid for my schooling by mauling rails. As a legislator, I was determined that no such tyranny should lord it over Kansas. The legislature was for freedom by a large majority. Both houses and the territorial governor, Reeder, were with us heart and soul. When first elected to the Kansas legislature, which was in 1857, the Free State men agreed to meet at Lawrence and Topeka and march to Lecompton in a body. Being in the lower district, I was with the party that met at Lawrence. 10:30 was the hour agreed upon, where the Free State men were to march into the town escorted by an armed guard. We entered before the others by several minutes and hitching our horses, scattered about the town, talking in small groups. Our conduct soon aroused the apprehensions of the pro-slavery men. When not far from the State House, I was accosted by some pro-slavery men, Judge Elmore, a man named Cato, another Brindle, and the third Hall, with, "What are yo'ns from?" I answered that I was from Douglas County, and Elmore asked, "What ye here for?" "I was sent by Jim Lane," I answered. "What ye goin' to do?" "Whatever Jim Lane wants to do." They began to talk quite loud, interspersing their remarks with unholy adjectives, among which damned abolitionists, damned fools, damned nigger thieves were the least complimentary. At this time a little Yankee of about 110 pounds from Massachusetts, named G.F. Warren, came up, took me by the arm, and said he wished to speak with me on a private matter, and hoped my friends would excuse me, as he was in a great hurry. With the assurance that I would return, I excused myself, and we were apart from the others, and asked, "What do you want, Warren?" "I want you to keep away from these fellows. I am afraid they will kill you." I had on my overcoat with pockets on the insides. I opened it, showed him the 2 Colt revolvers on the inside pockets, and told him to go on and attend his own business, that I wanted to talk to those gentlemen myself. If in the course of our discussion I found need of his aid, I would surely call on him. Leaving Warren, I went back to the pro-slavery men, whose numbers had been reinforced by several additionals, among them Colonel Young. The colonel wore a meat knife, or what people not accustomed to polite language would call a bowie, in his belt. A glance showed me that Warren was watching me with considerable anxiety from the corner. I took care to keep the pro-slavery men in front while talking to them. Young, in a milder tone than any of the others had used, asked, "What do you expect to accomplish in this assembly, anyway?" "We propose to break every link in the pro-slavery chain and do all Jim Lane requires to make Kansas free from master and slave." They grew boisterous, and Judge Elmore became insulting. I looked him in the face and said, "The angels are coming. The Lord is on our side, and his angels will soon be with us. Then you will hear the music from on high." One of the gentlemen said, "Listen to the damned fool. He's crazy." I answered, "I am not crazy, Judge," then looked at my watch, which had been set the evening before to correspond with the watches of our friends. It lacked less than 2 minutes of the time designated. I said, "I can almost smell the breath of the angels. I hear the rustling of their wings," to which Elmore cried, "The damned fool is either drunk or crazy. What is the matter with him?" His deep-toned voice, trained to command negroes when he rawhided them, had scarce died on the air when boom, boom, boom went the big brass drum of the fife's shrill shriek rose on the air. "What the hell is that?" roared Judge Elmore. "That is the music of the Lord's cavalry, coming to help us knock the shackles from every slave." By this time the head of Jim Lane's column, 700 strong, could be seen coming over the hill, with colors flying and drums beating. Judge Elmore, Colonel Young, and the followers started to run. I called to them to halt. "We are afraid of personal violence from Yankee fools," they answered. "There is no danger whatever," I answered. "We are Free State men, and I will see you are protected, for I am at the head of a company, and not a hair of your heads shall be touched." But their legs controlled their bodies, and they could not be persuaded. They ran away. We assembled and made a temporary organization. On that night the Free State members of the Assembly and some friends to the number of 300 went to a night session of a pro-slavery constitutional convention. The convention was assembled in a hall capable of holding about 700 persons. We took our seats in the rear, and though every man was armed with one and many with 2 revolvers, we were inclined to be peaceful, if unmolested. The pro-slavery men were very quiet, and their proceedings quite orderly. We listened to them for about 30 minutes, when a member began a tirade upon us, denominating us as the sons of feminine dogs, prefixed as an abundance of brimstone adjectives. In a moment the cup was filled and running over. Captain Walker, of our side, leapt to his feet and yelled, "God damn you, take that back." I looked about and was surprised to find, in addition to my own revolvers, 500 more covering every drop of pro-slavery blood in the house, from the chairman down. Striking his gavel on the desk, the chairman sprang to his feet, crying, "For God's sakes, don't shoot. That man is drunk and don't know what he is doing." Captain Walker quickly retorted, "Trot him out of there, then, and do it pretty goddamn quick, or I will order them to fire, and keep it up until the last dirty pro-slavery cuss is dead, pitched out of the window and in hell. We're not here to take any such stuff." In a second's time, 4 men had the drunken member by the legs and arms, hurried him out, and ran him off. We never knew where. Captain Walker then addressed the chairman, asking if it was true that we began this trouble. "No, you have been gentlemen," was the answer. "Now, Mr. Chairman, I want you to so report us. If I find that you have not so reported us over your own signature, I will kill you, goddamn you." When the legislature was assembled next morning, there was no opposition for us, and we had our own way. After the permanent organization, we adjourned to meet at Lawrence. At the close of our deliberations, March 1858, we had territorial law that was all new, except that referring to the records of deeds and marriages, which was thankfully received and peace followed. I went home to follow the practice of medicine and saw lumbers, which I did from 1856 to 1860, except the time spent in the legislature. During the fall of 1860, we elected Abraham Lincoln to champion the coming conflict between slavery and freedom, not of Kansas alone, but of all North America. Then the struggle began, and lasted until he dipped his pen and wrote the golden words, "Forever free, without regard to race or color." When the War of the Revolution was declared against the laws and authorities of the United States, I saw at once another move whose object was to extend slavery and illiteracy by a division of the territory, which could only be an example for other states to imitate when any political party was unsuccessful in an election, and divide the country up into a North and South, and East, Middle, and West Southern Confederacy, then the East, Middle, and West Northern Confederacy, and thus have 6 empires of quarreling fools who would ruin all our forefathers had given us under a sworn pledge to keep inviolate to the end of time. Lincoln said, "I will keep that pledge. Who will help me?" With a roar, all the loyal legions from over the nation answered, "I." War was on us, with all its diabolical fury, and ran with rivers of blood and death until 1,000,000 fell to rise no more.